Hi, everyone. This is Ellen Phi Gray coming to you again from Miami, Florida. I am a certified positive psychology practitioner and parent coach and founder of Parent with Perspective. And today, again, I am representing an international group of positive psychologists, educators, coaches, researchers who call ourselves Resilience Now for Parents. And we have been, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, meeting weekly and coming up with tips for parents that we post on resiliencenowforparents.org. And we also just released a free downloadable resource called Helping Our Kids Go Back to School Well, a practical guide for parents and educators during COVID-19. And that resource is available at www.backtoschoolwell.com. And we're hoping that you download that resource. It's chock full of free tips and suggestions for navigating through this really difficult time. And all the tips are based on evidence-based practices in positive psychology and education. I'm very pleased to say we're having great response from families who are reporting in that it's really useful for them during this time. And we're getting stories from people of how they are using these tips in our resource. So today, I'd like to bring in Kimberli Breen once again. She and I started part one of this conversation about how she is using these tips with her own family, her 11-year-old son, Orion. And besides being a parent, and a very dedicated one at that, Kimberli is a professional in the field of positive behavior support. So thank you again, Kimberli, for devoting another half hour to talking with me about how you are using these resources.
Sure. Thank you. I know when we chatted last time, we're like, there's so many more we could continue to go into. So I'm grateful for the chance to share a little bit more. And I was thinking about our last call, our last meeting. And, what I hope is that when people sit in and they listen to us, they kind of can hear our words continue, when they're in the real moments and things are happening, they might kind of hear this idea of one of these strategies and use it, which is really how I end up living, is that I hear strategies from you and from other people on our team, and I'll read something and then you think, well, what I'm currently doing right now isn't working, so I might as well try one of these. And so I was thinking about our last call, and I know we ended on this note of sort of saying, sometimes things are okay, but our children are perceiving them as not okay. And that's sort of, even for us as adults, it's this idea of angst, worry, stress. We get these sort of fear responses. And so we sort of ended saying, sometimes things are okay and we're perceiving them as not, and that the ebook has these strategies to sort of help us get into a better emotional, mental, physical state.
Yeah.
And I know you and I were chatting just earlier today that for some people things are not okay, or for all of us things are not okay sometimes. And so I wanted to make sure people knew that we're not saying the ebook strategies are only for perceived fear and perceived danger, but even in the times in our life when things are scary, when someone's sick, when we lose a loved one, when something happens in our environment and we don't feel well, that those are still good times for us to sort of keep our heads on, to keep ourselves in a sort of calm space. And I know for me, we talked about my son having special needs, and that comes out as like he has some emotional challenges and some academic challenges, and he's a very, very deep thinker, and that often leads to a lot of angst. And so I need to sort of be in the most calm, healed place that I can be in to help him when he gets in his moments. If we were both panicked at the same time, that would probably not get the best outcome. So I just wanted to give that shout out that, you know, we feel for you out there who are in real pain right now, who are scared of something that is a true danger at the moment, or who are recovering from something that is big and scary, and for your children too. And we hope for you also that some of the tips I talk about here today, or some of the ones that you read in the book, can still help you through hard times that are legitimately hard times.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're bringing that up. I had this uneasy feeling after our last conversation that we really didn't spend enough time acknowledging the suffering that really is going on around the world in many homes as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic, suffering not only physically, but financially. And there's a lot of stress out there. People are losing their homes. People are losing their jobs. There's a lot of struggling, and it's important to be compassionate. And that is one of the things that we do encourage, and kind of paint a little picture on how we can practice compassion in addition to empathy. You know, empathizing is great, but compassion is the action we take to help relieve other people's suffering. So we're hoping that this conversation, you know, moves us towards a greater place of compassion for everyone who's watching.
Yeah. I love the concept of compassion, and I love it related to how we interact with our children. And I know for many of us probably growing up, I don't know if we would have thought that that was a theme of adults practicing compassion towards children. And I think for different reasons in different communities with different cultures, sometimes the messages were much more harsh. And I also totally get people almost feeling some pride about that. You know, we had to be tough and we were told to be tough. And so there's the whole spectrum of kind of experiences and ways to look at this out there. But for me, I'll tell you, you know, kind of sharing some stories about how I've used some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
When I started to have more compassion for my son, it really helped me to just look at his behavior very differently. And so I think it's easy to look at a child's behavior as a problem. You know, it's an inconvenience for us as the adults. It's maybe annoying or stressful for us as the adults. But so compassion would say, like, why are they doing that? What do they need right now? And so as on a selfish angle, I'll say it's helped me be more effective with my son. So even if we were to do it for selfish reasons, right? It's amazing how just that perspective can shift and then help us choose better strategies. So one of the things the ebook has made me start thinking about is that I act as a coach in my professional life, and I know you do too. And so we coach sometimes professionals, or you coach family members, and it's this idea of like helping adults to use strategies that will best serve them to get their best quality of life.
Right.
And I know we've all heard the phrase of parents are a child's first teacher, but I would argue that parents are a child's first coach also. And, you know, the best teachers are coaches. So on some level, these are very similar things, but it depends on which area you're emphasizing. And so I've realized very much that I am my son's coach. I cheer him on. I encourage him. I try to give him tips and strategies on how to live his best life. And when I'm in the coaching mode, it helps me, I think, be a little less reactive. I'm not so much experiencing our situation from my perspective, like, oh, you know, this is inconvenient for me right now.
Right.
And I certainly go there sometimes, but if we try to act as like a coach in that moment to help our child get through that situation in the most successful way, I think they feel that. And you can even talk to them about it. Like, hey, I'm kind of like your coach. I'm like your, you know, your support. You know, my job is to help you be able to get through and handle these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
It just turns it all into almost more like a learning experience truly,
Uh-huh.
instead of what so often can feel like an emotional stressor between parent and child, right? That
Right.
be there.
Right. And when we're coming from that positive psychology perspective, then we necessarily are practicing compassion as coaches, because what's driving us is, how can I help?
Yeah.
You know, it's how can I help you? How can I help me? How can I help the situation,
Right.
you know, resolve itself or feel better? Or how can we solve this problem together, or whatever the moment is presenting to
Yeah.
us? And it also gets us into the moment, you know, kind of like acknowledging what's really happening. What does this moment call for?
Mhm.
And we also have to, in order to be able to do that, we need to practice self-compassion, you know, which is something that we cultivate. So, and then model that for our children and the rest of our family.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because it's not self-sacrificial
Yeah.
to be there to help the child. And I think sometimes people have to feel like they have to choose one thing or the other. Either the adult's needs are going to be met or the child's needs are going to be met. And so I'm kind of jokingly saying, but I mean it too, that, you know, it's okay to engage in good acts for partially selfish reasons. Like, helping your child successfully through these moments will make your day better too. And so it's not at all this idea of I'm just gonna, you know, be a martyr and suffer this pain, and whatever, it's whatever my child needs. It's truly going through this experience together and modeling the strategies, coaching them through, and then you both get the outcome. And I'll tell you, part of the reason this is on my mind, I think, today is that my son and I watched a show the other day, maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, and the mom character, the two siblings were arguing, and then the mom character, you know, comes up and she's like, I told you 1,000 times, you know, you guys, you know, have to get along. And that both kids start to tell the mom, but, you know, he's doing and she's doing. And the mom's like, you know, I already warned you, the toys are going to go away, so figure it out. And she walks away.
Mm.
And I, you know, everyone listening, you know, just kind of try to reflect on how many times in our lives we've asked a very little person, you know, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 18-year-old on some level is still a little person in terms of
Uh-huh.
their development and the whole span of their life,
Yeah.
to figure out something before we gave them the tools for figuring it out. And so they're going to use the tools they have. And like, oftentimes the tools they have are yelling, screaming, hitting, breaking, tantruming, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so then
Slamming
we
your
get that.
bedroom door, right?
Totally, right? And then usually, like, that mom in the show, it wasn't like she was done. The problem continued, and of course then the parent has to step back in again, and then they often think, well, now I have to go to punishment. So what I would, you know, ask everyone to think of, like, where was the instruction? If we go from like threatening and then you figure it out and then punishment, where was the teaching ever in that moment? And so one of the tips in the ebook talks about, I think it kind of comes out of the frame like practice. And what they're asking are these kind of several steps of when, and you can't do it in the moment. So in that moment when the siblings were fighting in the show, the mother couldn't do it in that moment. But
Right.
what she would do is the next time you help them solve that, and then, you know, before the problem happens again. So the next day or later that day, you could meet with both them individually or together, and you'd say, let's in our mind imagine what happens when we try to get together and share a toy. So just close your eyes and imagine you're there. And we're going to do this like mental practice of what it looks like and feels like. And I've done these kinds of strategies a lot with my son when it comes to like flying on an airplane, going to a restaurant, visiting someone's home who we haven't been to before. So whatever the scenario is, maybe for some of you listening, it would be going to the hospital to see a loved one, or when a loved one comes home and has to be quarantined in the house, you know. So what is the scenario, and kind of talk through with the child, kind of visually imagining visual imagery of what the scenario might be like, and like how it would go better and how it would go worse. And then talk about, okay, so what can we identify as some skills that would help us navigate that situation better?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario, you know, for the little girl and little boy, it's like, well, some of the skills might be, you know, designating which toys I really don't want to share. Like, this is my favorite one. You can touch the other ones, but not my favorite one, right? And it's okay. We all set limits. You're okay to set limits as a little person too. So like just talking with a child, like what would be some of the skills that would help you through that? And then you do one of my favorite things is rehearsal. And so this comes out of the field I work in too. So I work in positive behavior supports, or PBIS, used in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that whole model is that we have young people actually go through the motions of the behaviors we want to teach them. So if we're saying how to socially distance in class,
Uh-huh.
you would actually practice it, you know, and you would teach some skills around how to know you're far enough apart, and how to give a warm hello even with a mask on, you know. So we would actually practice those things. And so kind of get the mental practice, identify the skills, and then go through a sort of rehearsal, so that the next time it happened, one, the child may now actually be prepared. They may have learned the
Right.
skills and be mentally prepared for dealing with that situation. But then two, when the adult does have to come in and intervene, the adult can say, okay, pause. Amanda, what strategy were you saying you were going to use? Can I see it? Can you show me? You know,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, you had thought you were going to do something that might help. Do you remember what that was? So that's where the coaching comes back in. So when you think of, like, if you're coaching an athletic uh, sport, a
Right.
team, if you're, you know, coaching your child on any, and I think we get more used to coaching our children with like riding a bike, you know,
Uh-huh.
swimming, um, but how would we coach our children through solving problems with siblings, and coach them through a loved one being sick, and coach them through? And so I hope that helps people to think, you know, you sit with a child, not when it's the moment, not when it's the hardest moment. It has to be before or after, and
Right.
sort of calm place. And I've used this with my son. I can't tell you how many times. And now he's so used to it, because it's been years and years that we've done this rehearsal strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is he has autism, but it's whatever your child needs. So a lot of children need this, and there's, you know, it has nothing to do with autism.
Right.
And so now sometimes when he hears me starting to say something, like, I think he can tell by the way I'm saying it, we're going to go to so-and-so's house and they have a dog. My son's not that wild about dogs. And so my son he'll interrupt me and say, let's practice.
Uh,
And I'm like, okay, let's practice. So what are you going to say? And he'll, you know, and so we'll practice what he might say, what he might do. And you can just see him kind of become way more calm because he's
mhm.
already now prepared for what we're going to walk into.
Yeah. And now that, you know, kids are going back to school during a pandemic in whatever configuration, whether they're going to a brick and mortar building, whether they're staying home and doing remote learning, whether they're in learning pods, whether they're doing some hybrid combination of all of the above, there's so much unknown and uncertain that that practicing ahead and anticipating what they may need to deal with is so vital. You know, in the book we call it also coping ahead. Um, you know, so this is really a key strategy, you know, and probably this is going to prepare them for not only just this semester, but some time to come. You know, what is it going to be like when everyone sits, you know, apart and in a classroom and wears masks, or the teacher is behind a plexiglass shield, and where you can't go to the lunchroom, you're not going to be able to have recess, you won't be able to see the friends in the playground that you normally played with. Or what's it going to be like when you're learning only through a screen?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen when the electricity goes out and, you know, your Zoom is failing?
Day. Instead of a snow day, they'll have a light
Right. I mean,
day.
there's all of these different scenarios that kids are, and all of us are, you know, unfamiliar with. And if we can practice ahead and have tools to be able to handle situations, we're really not only filling our toolbox, but we're becoming more resilient at the same time.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying about the strategies generalize. So so this idea of teaching children to cope ahead, and along with the children, us learning too, because I didn't learn these things when I was little, and
Yeah.
I've come to know a lot of these strategies in my own career, but not all of them. And so it's very often I'm using something with my son that I kind of also need to still learn and benefit from. So we want everyone to certainly, when it comes to your own children, you're allowed to practice. You're allowed to just try. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? You're not a professional. I think sometimes people they're not sure that they know exactly how to do the thing, and so then they might not try it.
Right.
But
And our children can be our greatest teachers.
yeah, and let them, right? Let them do that with
Right.
you. And then ask, like, if you're okay expressing humanness, if so we know that the qualities that jobs are looking for these days have a lot to do with what we call like social emotional wellness skills, social emotional learning, mindfulness, all these things that are grounded really within positive psychology. So it's going to make your children more employable as they get older. If you can kind of model for them apologizing, and you can model for them saying, I don't really know how to do this for sure, but I'm going to try it.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we think we have to be perfect for our children. And I'll tell you, for me, that kind of bit me back a little bit, because my son just recently started saying things where that he had gotten the idea I wanted him to be happy all the time.
Ah.
And because I'm looking at, Dr. Mark Brackett's book, and looking at, Permission to Feel, for those of you out there, it's a great book. And it just made me more mindful. I don't know how I would have responded to that in the past, but now it made me more mindful that I really have to let him see my range of emotions.
Mm.
Because it's one thing to say, no, you don't always have to be happy. But if I'm always trying to be my best self around my son, and not letting him see that I can say, no, that made me mad, and that I was mad, and I was sad, and I was, then I think I didn't realize I was like implicitly giving him this message of where
Yeah.
his emotion needed to stay.
Right.
Um,
No, that's so interesting, because people, when they hear that I've studied the science of happiness and positive psychology, and then I do, coaching to help you become your best self, they think, oh, she's a real Pollyanna. She's thinks that, things are, she's going to teach me to smile all the time and be happy all the time. And no, that's a misconception of what this field is about. Our best selves are ones that can allow ourselves to experience the full range of emotions. And I'm so glad that you are bringing this up about our kids. It's so vital that our kids acknowledge that full range of emotions, and that it's okay to feel however we're feeling, and that if we're feeling a difficult emotion like sadness or frustration or fear, that emotion will pass if we allow it to flow through us, that it's not going to be there forever. And that on the other side, if we have cultivated the practice of finding our joy and happiness, we'll be able to find it again and savor those good moments. So, the laughter is at the end of the tears.
right. So, when we knew we were going to talk today, and sometimes I'll think like, okay, which tip or strategy I'm going to kind of talk about? And then I told you last time that life happens in between, and life offers us all these beautiful learning experiences. And so it was yesterday. So yesterday I had my son, he said he wanted to walk on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And so my son needs to practice walking well. Some of you might know other young people who tend to go up on their toes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's bad for your legs. And so he's mostly over it, but not totally. And so just having a real strong, confident gait is something he's still working on. So he said he wanted to go on the treadmill after I did. So when my turn was done, so it's his turn. And so I'm there with him and I'm coaching him. I'm giving him the tips on how to do it. And I'm giving him tips about, how to have his gait. And, I realized I have to really state it like 3 tips at a time. And I think for most children, once an adult starts to give more than that, it really feels like we're like lecturing and nagging them. And I so never want to be a nag. And yet I find myself falling into that all the time as a mom, but I really try not
Wait, you
to.
don't have a teenager yet. You'll
I
see.
know. I know. And he aspires. He's so excited that he's a preteen and he can't wait to be a teenager. And so he's on the thing and I'm giving him the tips. And in my head, I'm like, well, this is non-negotiable. You have to be safe. So like you have to do certain things the right way on it, right? And so I said, okay, I'm going to leave you alone now. These are the 3 things to tell yourself to do. And I'm right here nearby. I'm doing something else. So then when he was done, he sat down and I could tell he wasn't feeling great, right? There was something, because we had this plan to do these other exercises and you could tell he wasn't in the mood. So I took out the mood meter, which I think I told you last time. I actually printed a copy of it and I've just been randomly doing it with him. And I'm happy that I've just done it at random times because there was a lot of times where he said he was chill. That's the word he landed on. Yeah. How much energy do you have? How much pleasantness do you have? And you land on a word. And so many times I've done it and he's been fine. And so yesterday, I coached him, okay, so how much energy, how much pleasantness? And we landed on the word peeved, right? And so I said that makes sense. So it opened up this conversation. I said, so did I make you peeved when I was talking to you on the treadmill? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, so I'm trying to think through and I'm like talking out loud. I want to be able to help you, but I don't want to bother you when you're doing your own thing. And so I said, as long as it's not a safety issue, some of that, I don't have to say it to you. I said, so what if I asked you, do you want a tip? And then you can say yes or no. And if you say yes, you want a tip, then I'll give it to you. And if you say no, as long as it's not a safety issue, I'll leave you alone. Right. And he said yes. And then he said, let's practice. So I said, okay, pretend that you're on the treadmill, and he's sitting. And I said, hey, Orion, do you want a tip? And he goes, no. And I thought, I don't know why. I thought he was going to say yes, and I would give the pretend tip. Right. But of course, he wanted to practice telling me no, because he's a very polite. I think he almost works too hard to be, what he's considering a good boy. And I almost have to work harder to get him to let himself be human, which I understand. And when listening, that's not always the normal dynamic. So I said, okay, then you're good, right? And so I said, all right, well, so do you want to do the next thing we were going to do, this other machine? And he goes, no, I'm peeved.
That's terrific. You know, Mom, that was a lesson for you in practicing not giving tips. What's it like when you're not invited to give tips?
It felt horrible. Okay.
Well, you need to now practice your reaction or your response to not giving, not being invited to give tips.
You're right. You're right. I was quiet, and in that moment, we were in the learning moment. So I was kind of surprised and disappointed, but it was okay. But you're right that I actually need to at least mentally practice, like in the tip we just talked about, the visual practice.
Yeah.
And maybe what I'll do, seriously, because you just said that, the next time that we're going to do, and it might be later today, I'm going to say, hey, can we practice that strategy again? And so I'm going to ask if you want a tip. And then if you want, Orion, practice telling me no, so I can practice how to handle it, right? And I think that would be awesome, Ellen, because it would help him see that he's not the only one who has to practice strategies, right? I need practice too. Yeah. And, for families listening, I hope what you're hearing is what we call respectful. It's a form of respectfully disagreeing, right? Like our children can tell us no sometimes, right? And they can not do the thing we want them to do. But what we don't want them to do is yell at us, curse, run out of the room.
Right.
So it's like finding that, right? Like, are we teaching them how to disagree with us in a way that's respectful, that they could carry into a dating relationship and into a job
or into school, into school? That, that's probably teachers' number one wish and desire is that, you know, they talk about the kids, they want them to behave, but what they're really talking about is that respectful environment in the classroom where, you know, kids don't call out when they're not called on, they're not interrupting, they're not disrespecting their fellow classmates, they're not acting out. It is definitely about respecting one another.
Yeah, and practicing, kind of knowing the steps to it and practicing it, so
Yeah,
that it doesn't feel so harsh in that moment, right? So I
right.
thought, when that happened, I'm like, oh, I have to tell Ellen this, because it's just those moments where our
Yeah,
children present us these opportunities all the time. And so I think maybe just if I share just one last thing really quickly that sort of
great.
aligns with some of the things we've been talking about. And again, there are so many other tips in the ebook that are great and that we use, but something else that came up last night. And it's funny, you don't need to like search for material, right? When you have children, like how many things happen. So, because this is also another strategy that I sort of want to give people a shout out about that is often misunderstood. And so, during this time of COVID, our lives have changed a lot, like many people's lives have. And so, our family used to travel a lot. So, we live in Chicago, but I often work in California and Nebraska and New York, places around the country. And so, we haven't been traveling at all. And my son loved traveling. He loved it. And so it was always something that he could sort of look forward to.
Yeah,
And so he's been dealing very well with with the change, but it's nice to have things to look forward to in
right.
life, right? And so that I'm going to kind of combine talking about two things real quick here. So one is we made what you could refer to as what we call a token economy in schools if they use this, and it's sort of like students can earn points or tickets
Mm-hmm.
based on how they behave. And it's a behaviorism strategy out of behavioral psychology. And I totally understand people have had bad experiences with them, because just like anything, you can do it well or you could do it poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach schools how to use these appropriately, because I know that they can be done so poorly. So what we did is we made a list of the things that my son needs to and wants to work on improving, but that are all things within his grasp. So for example, just drinking plain water, not bubbly water, not juice, just regular water. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't love it. And so it's like, if you drink 3 waters a day, these big glasses, it probably counts as a little more than 3, but then he'd get 1 point on this sheet. And so it's just a way to remind us as parents too, like, oh, did you get your 3rd water in? If not, let's make sure this drink is a water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about a point sheet is that there's no cap. There's no like, it was a bad day because you didn't get 5 points. It is what it is. And that's one of the problems with people using point sheets. So it's my son's choice all the time. Do you want to earn your water point? And if so, he'll drink 3 waters that day. If he'd rather not drink the water than earn the point, then he doesn't drink 3 waters that day,
Mm-hmm.
right? You get that idea. And so we have things on there like yoga, because he likes doing yoga with me, but it also needs a little bit of encouragement. And so, do you want to do yoga today and get that point, or not do yoga today? And sometimes he chooses yes, sometimes no. And so for the last several weeks, we've had this point sheet, and it has these lists of kind of healthy behaviors, and he can choose. And what's nice about when you do it the right way, there's no pressure, there's no shame. He gets whatever points he gets. You celebrate whatever they do that earns a point. And then he kind of can look forward to something. So if there was a toy he really wanted, and there was no reason for a toy right now, there's no holiday or event. And we are big on toys. We buy a lot of toys for my son. We all like to play. And so we said, okay, if you earn a certain number of tickets, you can get this toy. And so we made it equivalent. So we like took the price of it and like doubled or tripled it. So we said like 120 points would get this toy, which is a lot of points. So don't make all children wait that long. Some children are going to need to wait 3 tickets away from something, right? But we're very generous about giving them all these opportunities. So the reason I'm sharing this is that it relates to the tip. It wasn't in the ebook, but it was on the Resilience Now for Families site, where folks can see a tip, and there's like almost every week there's a tip there posted from the collective group.
ResilienceNowForParents.org. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And so one was this idea of like 3 phases of fun that you look forward to something, and that's like part of the fun is just looking forward to it,
Yeah.
and then you experience the thing, and then you remember the thing, right? And you can speak to this better, but it's really stuck with me when I heard the group talking about this like 3 phases. And like now more than ever, like what time is even, where it's been more relevant that we need to stretch out fun with our children, because
Yep.
we're to be able to do things every day. Now maybe they're doing them once a week, right?
Yep.
And so for us, using this point sheet was a way to look forward to this
Mm-hmm.
toy that he was going to earn. And we could really encourage him and give him positive acknowledgement and feedback about his progress. And, he would say, when am I going to earn it? It's like, who knows? If you are, if you get lots of points, you'll earn it sooner. If you get less points, you'll earn it later.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you land, you land. So us as parents, we bought the toy almost right away and we kept it put away. And so last night he had worked really hard throughout the whole day. He was getting really close, but last night he really all day he worked and earned points. And so he earned it almost right before bed last night. And he was so excited. But what I wanted to share is that he appreciated this toy like
Uh,
no toy he's ever, I mean,
aw.
he didn't even want to open it right away. He wanted to just look at the box and really like read everything on the box. And when his father was going to go get the toy, he goes, "Let me go wash my hands. I want to have clean hands when I touch the toy." And he's
It's sacred, that new toy.
so sacred. And he has a lot of toys. We're very pro toy in our house. It's not like so even though he has a lot of toys, even though he gets a lot of gifts for different reasons, and even though we've been using this kind of point sheet situation in the past, this was the first time, like developmentally, he really tuned into my effort will get me this thing. And I equate it to like adults going to work and earning money, and then they choose their money, how they spend their money. And so you can do that at home if you want to make it about, saving and all of that. But his appreciation of it was just huge. And so, don't rob yourselves or your children of all those little joyful moments.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we rush through the ice cream cone, we rush through the event. It's okay to build them up. No, not with giving false hopes or expectations and making something better, but like, what's the ice cream going to taste like? What flavor do you think you're going to get on Friday when we go, right? So I hope that helps a little bit in times where people maybe don't have as much money or as much time. Let's stretch out and enjoy what we can to its fullest.
That wise words and compassionate words as well. And I will share this, having something to look forward to has been really my struggle during the pandemic. My grown son and daughter-in-law don't live in Miami. They live in another city, and my husband and I have to travel to see them, or they have to travel to see us. And I don't really know when we're going to get to see them again. And so what has gotten us through in the before times, pre-pandemic, is those next visits. We had those to look forward to, and that uncertainty has been difficult. And so we're trying to kind of like reframe that, what we're looking forward to, because that just makes us feel better. Maybe it's looking forward to the next telephone conversation or FaceTime, or sharing stories. So it's this time has shifted our perspective, and I'm glad that there are those proven tips, evidence-based strategies that we know work, from positive psychology and education, and from the wisdom traditions as well. So Kim, I want to thank you again for sharing this time with me. I'm going to share the screen just to show everybody what the website looks like, where they can download our book at www.backtoschoolwell.com. This is what it looks like. This is the front cover of the book by Resilience Now for Parents, hot off the press, free for you to download, and a little bit about who we are, Resilience Now for Parents. So I invite everyone to go to www.backtoschoolwell.com, download this free resource for parents and educators to navigate through this difficult time of COVID-19, and to learn tips and strategies that you can use throughout your family's life, no matter what stage you're at, whether you have little ones or bigger ones. They all apply, and some of them we could use ourselves as parents and as partners and workers and spouses, especially the breathing ones. Maybe we can get to that next time. Love to meet your son Orion. Maybe he could teach us some things in another Zoom. So we can look forward to that. And I want to thank you once again, Kimberli Breen, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.